Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. In the description of this video, you can find my compiled link. Through there, you can find ways to support the channel, my other social media, and more. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. How's it going, everybody? CJ here, back into the video. We're doing a first thoughts today. This first thoughts is on Aragorn, the Unifier. Card is really cool. It can do a whole bunch of stuff. It just makes it so every spell you cast has a little extra gravy on it. We got white spells making 1/1s, red spells dealing damage, blue spells scrying 2, green spells giving a +4/+4 pump. Card's cool. There's a couple different ways you can go about building this, all the way from multicolored matters to making a monocolored 4-color deck and capitalizing on one ability as much as possible. There's some interesting ideas that I have for this deck, and I'm excited to hop into it. Also, I'm going to put this commander in my Ramos deck, so if you have a Ramos deck, definitely consider doing that. It seems really good in there. So, the categories I'll be talking about today are multicolored matters. I have both for value and for kind of storm, like cheap multicolored stuff just to get triggers, and then some cards that synergize with multicolored cards. After that, we have color changing cards. Seems really good in this deck. Both color words or change the color of your spells. After that, we have some categories talking about each individual ability, so you can kind of throw cards in that synergize well with that if you lean towards one ability over the other. There's some token synergy cards. There's a few cards that synergize specifically when scrying. Also some strategies that work really well when you're scrying. I'll be talking about those. There's a number of cards that will work really well with the damage ability to your opponents as a win con. And there's a lot of ways to capitalize on the +4/+4 ability, making your commander almost a Voltron commander. I like that idea. It seems pretty cool. And then after that, I got one extra little strategy that I thought of that I think would be really good. I think Cascade would work really well with this commander because you cast a spell, you get the triggers off that spell, you cascade into a new spell, get the triggers off that spell. Seems really, really good. And lastly, we have a couple of one-off cards I wanted to talk about. The very first thing I wanted to mention before we go through all those categories, though, are some combos. There are some really good combos that Aragorn can be the finisher in or just a part of, and some of those combos are Food Chain. Food Chain works really well with Aragorn. Say you have Squee and Food Chain. You can make infinite mana, but also deal infinite damage to your opponents. Mist Hollow Griffin. You can sort your deck exactly how you want it, essentially. You get Scry 2 an infinite number of times, and infinite mana. Eternal Scourge, just infinite mana, but you should be able to win off of that, hopefully. Also, Alluring can be a great infinite combo, with cards like Fleetfoot Panther, Raging Kavu, White Mane Lion, or Shrieking Drake. You can get infinite triggers. Say it's Fleetfoot Panther, that's infinite tokens. Raging Kavu, infinite damage. Also, both of those, infinite +4/+4. White Mane Lion's infinite tokens, and Shrieking Drake just lets you scry as much as you want. Now let's go back to where we were. Multicolored cards matters. We're going to start off outside the combo stuff. The first part of the multicolored cards matter I'm going to be talking about are just kind of bigger, splashier spells, just kind of value spells that work really well that are 3 or more colors. So there's 3 that are actually 4 colors, and those 3 are Inktreader Nephilim, K&T, and Omnath Locus of Creation. These will trigger all 4 abilities of Aragorn, which is ideal. That's really good. Seems like all 4 of those are great includes in whatever Aragorn deck you're building. Then there's a few 3-color cards I wanted to mention just for value purposes. Akim can get you an extra token. Chulain seems like insane value. There's Wargate. Jetmir is a great win con. Ginny Faye to turn those tokens into cats and dogs. Kit Kanto, I like that card a lot because it can use the tokens to give your commander trample, and then your commander can kind of get in for lethal commander damage pretty easily because +4/+4 is a lot. Knotvine Mystic is a great mana dork. Ryan, amazing for this deck, cares about multicolored cards, is 3 colors, I like it. Trace of Abundance, it's a 2 mana, 3 color enchantment that ramps you, auto include. Guided Passage is a cool tutor. Maelstrom Wanderer, a little bit of Cascade right there, seems fun. And Riku. Being able to copy spells is always good. And be able to create tokens is always good. I like this card a lot, and I think that it's just a fun include. I always try to find spots where Riku fits, and I think this is a decent deck for Riku. Some additional 3-colored stuff that are not really single cards, but cycles, includes the Charms. There's also a 2-colored set of Charms, which are also very good and definitely should be considered for this deck. However, I'm not going to talk too much about 2-colored cards specifically in this category, just because 3 colors what matters more. There's so many 2-colored cards. So many. And then there's also the Ultimatum cycle. That could be really fun in the deck. If you're thinking you don't want to go more value and big stuff and you want to kind of just go cheap and almost storm off with a bunch of little things and get as many triggers as possible, then there's a good number of cheaper cards that you can throw into this deck. Starting off, we got Bant Sureblade, Naya Hushblade, and Crystallization. Those are all 2-mana 3-colored cards. Seems really good in the deck. Then there's a bunch of 1-mana 2-colored cards. A few that I figured would be worth mentioning include Judge's Familiar, Zealous Guardian, Figure of Destiny, Make Your Mark, Barkshell Blessing, Dryad Militant, Elvish Hex Hunter, Race, which is also fantastic if you're leaning into the token strategy, and he makes a token when you cast him, which is nice. Safe Right Quest, Seed Cradle Witch, Blister Coil Weird, Clout of Dominus, Niv Magus Elemental, Stream Hopper, Boggle, Fossil Find, Guttural Response, and Wild Cantor. Wild Cantor is really cool, especially if you have Ryan in play, because then you can kind of bring it back and forth a lot. If you do go with either of these multicolored strategies where you're going to be playing a lot of multicolored cards, then it seems like it's a good idea to also throw in cards that synergize with casting multicolored stuff or synergize with you having a bunch of multicolored creatures in play. Some of those include General Ferris Rockerick. I love this card. I have him as a commander. Seems fantastic for this deck. Village Wayfarer. Convoking everything out seems awesome. Glass of the Guild Pact, just a little +1/+1. Hero of Precinct 1, make an extra token. Knight of New Alara. Mana Cannons can kind of go in tandem with the red ability on Aragorn to burn out your opponents. Maze Behemoth and Maze Glider are the 2 from the Maze cycle that I figured would be worth mentioning for this video. Pyro Convergence, some more direct damage. Tome of the Guild Pact, card draw. And Urza's Filter, make your spells cheaper. Love that card. Moving on, we're going to talk about the color change strategy. There's cards that both change color words or change the color of the spells you're casting. So changing a color word is essentially taking Aragorn and saying, instead of casting a white spell to get a 1/1, I'm going to make it say, I cast a blue spell to get a 1/1. And so then every blue spell you cast makes you a 1/1 and scry 2. I think a lot of these cards I'm about to talk about can go into almost any of the Aragorn strategies you're building. And I especially like them because they kind of make it so monocolored strategies are really viable. You can make it so every single time you cast a blue spell, all 4 abilities trigger. And that seems really cool. I like that idea a lot. But let's just talk about those cards first. Let me mention them. I gotta mention them. You got Alter Reality, Crystal Spray, Glamour Dye, Mind Bend, Sleight of Mind, Spectral Shift, Swirl of Mists, Trait Doctoring, Whim of Volrath, and Painter's Servant. Every spell you cast is going to be whatever color you name. So if you name blue, every spell you cast is blue, and you're always going to scry 2 whenever you cast a spell. That's great. I do love the idea, though, of being able to change the color words. So let's say you're playing a mono red deck, almost mono red, plus splashing some cards like these so that we can change the colors and do some other things, but make it so every card in the deck otherwise is like red. And then every spell you cast is just 3 damage, 3 damage, 3 damage, 3 damage. Seems so fun. I just love the idea. I think it's hilarious. And making a 4-color, monocolored deck could be a lot of fun. Obviously, blue is the one that's more catered towards this idea just because blue has all the color changing cards. But you can kind of do it in any way. It's just a fun card. And I think these are really fun. So, it seems like they're worthwhile to include. Because of the existence of Whim of Volrath, I think that this seems like the most fun strategy for the deck. just my personal opinion, I love this idea. You can cast from a Volrath, changing it so instead of white spells making 1/1s, blue spells do, and then buy it back. And then cast it again. That triggers, you make a 1/1, you scry 2, and then make it so blue spells deal damage instead of red. Buy it back. Make it so green spells, or blue spells grow instead of green. Buy it back. And then you can just keep casting it and buying it back and getting all 4 triggers every single time. This is just like, you can just build this as like a buyback deck. Just a recast things from your hand and get a million triggers deck. The more I think about it, the more I like this idea. And yeah, I think I'm going to actually end up doing this. I already have a deck that's built around changing the colors of things, but this is like a different strategy than that. And I like this idea a lot because you're just playing nonsense cards just for the triggers, and I love this. If nobody else do this, because I'm going to do this. So stay away from that. Next up, we're going to talk about some synergies that work really well with each individual ability in case you want to lean towards one or another. Starting off with token cards. There's a lot of good token synergies you can throw into this deck if you want to be casting a lot of white spells. Some of those include Adrix and Nev, Doubling Season, Anointed Procession, Primal Vigor, and Mondrak to double your tokens. You also have some card draw built in with Benny Brax, Idol of Oblivion, and Staff of the Storyteller. Some additional good token synergy cards are Brutaclad. You can turn your tokens into whatever token you want. Combine Chrysalis. I love this card, and I never really see good homes for it. This seems like a fantastic spot for it. Divine Visitation. Who needs 1/1s when you can have 4/4 flyers? Inspiring Leader and Intangible Virtue to give him a big buff. Jaheira to turn him into Mana Dorks. I love that idea. Nayali, give him double strike and essentially card draw. And Second Harvest, double your tokens. Seems really good. Now let's talk about cards that synergize with the scrying ability. There's a couple of cards that actually care about scrying, and those include Elegeth, Kinesos, and Elminster. Elegeth makes it so you draw cards, Kinesos makes it so you scry an additional, Elminster just does Elminster stuff. Very good card. Along with those, if you're able to control the top card of your library by scrying a lot, cards like Elsha, Melik, Reality Chip, and Future Sight become a lot higher value. Along with those, God Eternal Kefnet, Approach of the Second Sun, Vesuvian Drifter, Temporal Mastery, and Possibility Storm all gain a ton of value as well. Approach just becomes a very fast win con. God Eternal Kefnet I love. Possibility Storm is a card I love. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you'll know that I talk about Possibility Storm a lot. This is a great deck for it for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons being that you get to scry, so you can kind of control what you're going to storm into. And it's a cast trigger and another cast trigger. So you get to cast the thing for free. So you cast something. You get all your Aragorn triggers. You flip into whatever you get off Possibility Storm. You get to cast that. You get more Aragorn triggers. It works really well inside this deck. Like, similar to how Cascade works in this deck. I love it, and it's an auto include. I love Possibility Storm. Moving on, we're going to talk about ways to really effectively utilize the damage ability of Aragorn. There's a lot of ways to make that a real clock that can burn out your opponents fast. Some of those include giving Aragorn Infect with Corrupted Conscience and Grafted Exoskeleton, because if Aragorn's the one dealing the damage, that just means 4 red spells and all your opponents are dead to Infect. Similarly, you can use Lifelink to gain life off of Aragorn, so Witch's Clinic and Shadow Spear seem like cool includes for the deck. Since you're doing non-combat damage, Chandra's Incinerator seems disgusting in the deck. You can also double the damage or triple the damage using cards like Solfim, City on Fire, Fiery Emancipation, Fiendish Duo, and Gisela. Also, Gisela's multicolored, so that makes it a little better. Nullspine Dragon can draw you a ton of cards, and then Neheb can make you a buttload of mana if you're casting a bunch of red spells before your combat. Next up, we're going to talk about ways to capitalize on the green ability, the Pump ability. This ability is much more straightforward, but there are still some interesting synergies that you can throw into the deck to capitalize on it. First off, you've got Rancor and Luxodon Warhammer. Giving Aragorn Trample can turn Aragorn into commander damage clock. Like, you can win the game via Voltron with a bunch of green spells, because +4/+4 is a lot. And he's already at 5/5. So it won't take long before you can just kill people, especially if you have trample. Or flying, or shadow, or whatever other evasive keyword you want to insert there. Evasiveness is really what I'm talking about right now. There's cards like Greater Good, Life's Legacy, and Momentous Fall that can draw you a ton of cards. Rishkar's Expertise, very similar. Vanish into Memory is really, really cool in this deck. Let's say you cast just 2 green spells on Aragorn. Alright, just 2 green spells. Boom. Aragorn gets +8/+8. He's at 13/13. You cast Vanish into Memory on Aragorn. You first make a 1/1, you scry 2, and then you draw 13 cards. And then at the end step, Aragorn comes back into play, and you have to only discard 4. It's nuts. Vanish into Memory seems like an auto include in this deck because of that green ability. It's so good in this deck. I love it. Ryu, also really cool in this deck because you can pump him up. Silvala can make you a ton of mana by pumping anything up. And I already mentioned a little bit of Infect earlier. Let's talk about Infect again. Blighted Agent or Inkmoth Nexus, some evasive Infect creature. You play Blighted Agent, you pump it a few times, somebody dies. Seems really worthwhile. Moving on to the Cascade idea. I think Cascade's going to work really well in this deck. As I mentioned already, similar to like Possibility Storm, you cast something, you get the Aragorn triggers. You cascade into something, you cast that, you get the Aragorn triggers on that. So you just get a lot of extra triggers. So Cascade seems like a lot of fun. Some of the cool Cascade cards I wanted to mention are Apex Devastator, Ardent Plea, Aurora Phoenix, which is nice and recursive, Bloodbraid Elf, Dark Apostle, Ethereum Horn Sorcerer, which is great because you can kind of bounce it to your hand and replay it, Emoti if you want to go big, Meteoric Mace, which is nice because it also can give trample, Natural Reclamation, its removal, Sakashima's Protege, Shardless Agent, Sweet Gum Recluse, Throes of Chaos, which is fantastic because you can recast it from the graveyard and happens to be red, so you're getting the damage trigger off every single time you do, which is a clock, Violent Outburst, and Wild Magic Sorcerer. If you do go this route, there's numerous cards that really synergize well with you casting spells from exile. Some of those include Faldhorn, Nalfeshni, Passionate Archaeologist, more damage, more of a clock, Pia Nalar to make Thopters, Keeper of Secrets, Mizzix, really cool in this deck, The Lost and the Damned, Vega for card draw, and Averna. Now all that's left is the one-off cards. Some of the one-off cards I wanted to mention are Shrieking Drake, Whip Silk, Shimmering Wings, Flickering Ward, Crown of Flame, View from Above, and White Mane Lion are all really interesting cards in this deck. They're relatively cheap to cast, and they return to hand, so that way you can recast them. So like Shrieking Drake is 1 blue, you play it. Trigger, you get to scry 2. And then it enters, trigger, you bounce it back to your hand. 1 blue, scry 2. It's just 1 blue, scry 2, however many times you want. Similarly, Whip Silk, Shimmering Wings, Flickering Ward, and Crown of Flame, they're all 1 cycle. You can do almost essentially the same thing. It just costs 1 additional mana to do so, but you have it in all the colors. Do you want to know what's better than getting triggers from Aragorn? Getting twice as many triggers from Aragorn, or more. Some cards that can help you do that are Helm of the Host, Irenicus's Vile Duplication, Double Major, both Sakashimas, and Spark Double, making an extra Aragorn or multiple Aragorns that are not legendaries, so that way you can keep them in play and just get extra triggers every time. Unreal. Super, super powerful. I think it's great. And the last card I wanted to mention, Dovescape. This seems like an interesting Dovescape deck because you still get the Aragorn triggers off of whatever you cast into Dovescape. So you're going to make a bunch of tokens. Everyone's going to be making a bunch of tokens. But you still get the extra triggers, which breaks parity. So you can kind of win off of that. Like you accrue extra value that your opponents won't. So I think that you break parity enough that Dovescape could work in this deck. That is everything I have for Aragorn the Unifier. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.